areas of societal participation in education. Unit Introduction. Dear learner, would you please once again remember what you discussed in the previous units? Yes, you have learned the basic concepts, characteristics of school-society relations, nature of educational organizations and schools, as well as the rationale for the school-society relations in Unit 1. We have seen that diverse nature of the school and society in Unit 2. At the same time, we have seen also the essence of participatory approach, major goals, obstacles and major partners in school-society relations in Unit 3. In Unit 4 we have seen that school improvement and societal participation. This unit will help you to have understanding about the areas of societal participation in education. For these purpose, the whole unit is divided into 4 sections. The first part of this unit begins with the diagnosis of educational conditions, needs, priorities and resources. At the same time, it gives insights with regard to policy making and governance and the instructional programs. Finally, this unit attempts to provide the benefits of societal participation in education. Unit Learning Outcomes. Upon completion of this unit, you should be able to identify the educational conditions, needs, priorities and available resources of their own particular society. Explain the different benefits of societal participation in education. Lesson 1, the diagnosis of educational conditions, needs, priorities and resources. Activity. Dear learner, what is the best way to improve parent, family, and community involvement in education? Do you see any importance of involving the community in diagnosis of educational needs, priorities and resources? Very good. Dear learner, have you imagined what type of areas of potential collaboration in education in your surrounding areas? Yes, as it has been explained elsewhere in this module, there is an egg-chicken relationship between education and society. One is the result of the other. Hence, in this lesson you will study the importance of societal participation, especially in the diagnosis of educational conditions, needs, priorities and resources in facilitating student learning. At the end, you will understand what efforts should be exerted so that education and community complement each other for the well-being of the country. To start with, the educational system should not be regarded as a branch of the bureaucracy. Instead, it should be a subsystem highly interactive with all other parts of the social whole. The point is to give students, parents and teachers responsibility over their own affairs, to the point of enabling them to administer the educational system on their own within the context of natural or contractual communities. Participation in education can be analyzed in terms both of the degree of participation and the areas of education in which greater participation can occur. Hence, the degree of participation able to be achieved in any given society at any given time will vary considerably based on its political, social, cultural, and economic context. Given this fact, achieving the greater participation of more partners is clearly an evolutionary process and will proceed at varying speeds depending on a number of factors and conditions. Institutional and individual commitment, resources, appropriate mechanisms, personal expertise and others. This possible range of collaboration with outside actors, as well as the more active participation of teachers within and across schools, can also be analyzed in relation to participation in several different areas of education, among these. 1. The diagnosis of educational conditions, needs, priorities, and resources. 2. Policy making and governance, the setting of goals, planning of programs, and managing of personnel and budgets. And 3. The instructional program, both the determination of educational content, the curriculum and teaching materials, and teaching and training, the pedagogy and teaching methods, have paramount importance. Schaefer, 1994. Activity. Dear learner, in what ways do you consider parents as valuable resources to schooling? Why we need to understand the families and communities as a resource? Or, why is focusing on family and community important? When we are looking the first area mentioned above, a higher level of involvement of participation, defined as having a share in, having a part in, being part of, is achieved farther along the range, where parents take a more active part in the activities of associations, perhaps help in the classroom, and assist in other work. In this way, the focus of their relationship with the school widens from that of the parent concerned with his/her child's education per se, to a more global concern with the school as a whole. For teachers, as well, such expanded participation can widen the focus of concern from his/her classroom and students to a broader interest in the quality of the entire school and of its relationship to the surrounding community. The diagnosis of educational conditions, needs, priorities, and resources, is of particular importance here. Depending on the extent of autonomy available to communities, schools, local government, and local education officers, it can serve as the basis for more relevant educational planning, programming, content, and methods. Just as importantly, it can begin the process of getting potential partners, parents, community members, even teachers, more deeply involved in local education, caring more about it and feeling more ownership of it. According to Schaefer, 1994, a more participatory process of diagnosis entails 2 things: 1, the creation of a database development profile of the community, of perhaps of the sub-district or district, especially in the sector of education, and 2, the development of mechanisms to encourage the involvement of members of the community in the process. The first can help clarify the development problems of a community and the potential role of education in resolving these problems. It requires the surveying of a variety of different issues as illustrated below. These include: 1. The creation of a community profile. The first requires the surveying of a variety of different issues. These include: a. Indicators and needs of general development, population dynamics and health status. Economic development, income levels, and employment patterns. Housing and transportation and the existence of disadvantaged areas or groups. b. Indicators and needs of educational development such as absolute totals and rates of enrollment, graduation, and literacy. Student-teacher ratios. The magnitude and causes of non-participation, of both students and teachers, absenteeism and dropout. Gender imbalances in education. The absence of education opportunities for particular groups, preschool children, illiterate adults, unemployed youth, ethnic minorities, and the status of mother tongue education and of traditional knowledge in school. c. Available local resources, that means, available educational programs and facilities, in and out of school. Financial and human resources and local organizations and other sectors involved in education. D. Educational processes, Patterns of school management and teaching learning processes. E. The nature of participation in education, such as the motivation and activities of teachers, as well as the extent to which parents and community organizations are involved in education. F. Educational needs and priorities, like what is more important, greater quantity, more places, or higher quality, better teaching, more relevant content. Where should new schools be located? School mapping. What are priorities by level, type and student gender? Mechanisms and procedures to gather data on these issues, especially those relating to educational processes, priorities, and existing resources, may not exist at all in a given area. If they do, they may be the exclusive domain of local government, of officials of another sector such as health or agriculture, or of the local education office, and may produce data not made available to other sectors. District health offices, for example, may gather periodic data concerning population changes, but this information may not be shared with the education office responsible for locating new primary schools. Local education officials may gather data from school questionnaires for regular transmission to higher levels of the bureaucracy, but the data might not be available or used for determining local needs and priorities. For example, whether imbalances exist in enrollment and dropout rates among villages or between boys and girls. And officials of public and private school systems, or formal and non-formal education programs, in the same area may not be aware of the needs or the available resources in each other's system. 2. The involvement of more actors in diagnoses. The second part of this process of diagnosis relates to the roles and responsibilities, if any, of teachers, parents, and members of the community at large in any assessment which is carried out. Such involvement may not exist at all, may be limited to responding to occasional questionnaires, or be restricted to only certain, perhaps elite, groups within the community. But a more sensitive and accurate profile of a community's conditions and needs and the setting of more relevant educational priorities will likely only be achieved to the extent that those who actually do the teaching, teachers, and the learning, students. Those who indirectly or directly finance much of the schooling and gain quite direct benefit from it, the parents, and those who are meant to benefit more generally from the education provided, the community, are involved in the process of diagnosis. Hence, several mechanisms might be used to enhance the participation of these partners in such an exercise. Some relate to the collection of data, whereas others are more concerned with data analysis and priority setting. Among these, Schaefer, 1994, stated the following. A. More consistent, systematic, and integrated data collection. On the assumption that in many countries considerable data related to the issues discussed above is already gathered at the local level by many different agencies and sectors, local government, health clinics, agricultural extension agents, education offices. Ways can be found to ensure that the data are gathered in a more consistent, systematic, and integrated fashion. At a minimum, data gathered through separate mechanisms and therefore likely available only in dispersed locations, village offices, health clinics, education offices, should be consolidated in one place. Even more useful would be joint data collection exercises among the various agencies and services present in the community. This could be done via regular joint household censuses or more specific, ad hoc surveys and questionnaires. This is especially important for education in regard to data on health status, population changes, enrollment and dropout rates, by gender, and the existence and problems of particularly disadvantaged areas or groups. B. The seeking of parent and community opinion. In addition to the often regular diagnosis of development needs, special emphasis could be placed on collecting the opinions and aspirations of parents and other community members concerned about education, both in general and also on more specific issues, such as the location of new schools or the kinds of skills children require from schools. In-depth interviews and focus group discussions, group interviews, may help in this regard. C. The involvement of other actors in diagnoses. As a kind of extension agent of the Ministry of Education and, in many communities, still among the most educated and respected of its members, teachers may not only have something useful to say about education, they may also be particularly able to gather and synthesize the needs and priorities of the community. Officers of whatever school parent community association exists may also help in this regard. Such processes will be encouraged to the extent that there is a viable, continuing, and active dialogue among the various actors at the community level. D. For a synthesis of data and the setting of priorities. A variety of informal or more formal mechanisms, for example, the School Parent Community Association, may be developed as for the analysis of the data collected, the synthesis of the data into felt needs, and the determination of priorities among the needs identified. Lesson 2, Policy Making and School Governance. Dear learner, would you please once again remember what you discussed in the previous sections? Yes, you have learned the first areas of societal participation in education, that is the diagnosis of educational conditions, needs, priorities and resources. This lesson will help you to have understanding about the second area, societal participation in policy making and school governance. Let us look together. Activity. Dear learner, what do you understand by the term governance in education? And why it is so important? What is the difference between policy making and governance? The second area where greater participation is possible involves policy making and governance. According to Schaefer, 1994, this area incorporates the setting of school goals and targets, the planning of school policies and programs, and the managing of school budgets and personnel. In this regard, both teachers and parents can play a more important role. For that reason, one of the core principles of good governance is to facilitate public participation in the decision-making process. Above all, public participation increases the likelihood that actions taken or services provided by public agencies more adequately reflect the needs of people and that the benefits of development are more equitably shared. Here, a purely descriptive definition of governance refers to the exercise of economic, political and administrative authority to manage a nation's affairs. It is the complex mechanisms, processes, relationships and institutions through which citizens and groups articulate their interests, exercise their rights and obligations and mediate their differences. UN, 2008. Then, what is local governance? Local governance comprises a set of institutions, mechanisms and processes through which citizens and their groups can articulate their interests and needs, mediate their differences, and exercise their rights and obligations at the local level. The building blocks of good local governance are many: citizen participation, partnerships among key actors at the local level, capacity of local actors across all sectors, multiple flows of information, institutions of accountability and a pro-poor orientation. Therefore, a more decentralized governance structure is needed so that schools, as unique educational entities, can offer their local communities the services, programs, and activities which they desire. If adults are going to develop this ownership and commitment to their local schools, the governance of education must be decentralized so they can participate in decision-making activities at the local school level, which directly influence the quality and quantity of education offered to children. The school committees, school councils or parent-teacher groups established to facilitate participatory decision-making must be based on a collaborative management philosophy of governance. The term governance can cover a wide range of activities. For our educational purposes, Schaefer, 1994, includes the following. 1. The establishment, modification, and implementation of schools' goals and objectives. This type of involvement would allow parents and teachers to shape the tone of their school, have it conform to their value systems, and truly address their perception of the type of schooling their child receives. This process might be done only occasionally or more regularly, perhaps annually. 2. The selection of specific targets related to areas such as enrollment, attendance, and retention rates and academic results. 3. The development of school policies in regard to student enrollment, attendance, absenteeism, and promotion student discipline. Staff, especially teacher, management such as the setting of required qualifications, recruitment, training, monitoring, disciplining, and remuneration. School calendars and class timetables as well as class size and allocation. 4. The planning of school programs designed for improving school quality, reducing class size, organizing in-service training for teachers, buying additional textbooks, providing remedial special education for disadvantaged groups and encouraging productive work. 5. The determining of the school's annual financial requirements and budget, including costs of construction and maintenance, materials and textbooks, staff development programs and funding special programs, see number 4 above. 6. The collecting of funds from sources such as the central ministry, local government, parents and community groups, private enterprises, NGOs and productive activities of the school. 7. The managing and accounting for school finances. One author has described 3 models of educational governance. The administrative model leaves educational governance to the central office or other offices down the hierarchy where power has been delegated. The professional model leaves governance to the professionals at the school site on the grounds that they are the best to determine the needs of learners and best capable of developing structures to satisfy such ends. The participatory model is one which aims at involving lay people or communities and parents. Chimenge, 1992. The last 2 models imply some kind of devolution of authority from the center to the regional, district, and, above all, school levels. It is such devolution which leads ultimately to greater school-based management and reform, bringing the authority to create better learning conditions closer to the spot where teaching and learning occur. The most effective policies are those that either have originated on-site or use the input from and participation by teachers, leaders, and the community to support teachers and the school. Policies implemented or adapted by the school community to respond to teachers' needs, and their students in context have proven more effective in the long run than those implemented by other entities. The participation of teachers and school staff in their own process of change has been proven to have a positive effect on the development and implementation of policies directed at teachers, Tato and Schaefer, 1994. Such a process involves several principal ideas. 1. The school, operating on a relatively autonomous basis, becomes the principal entity of any change in the educational system. 2. Cooperation and the sharing of responsibilities of all of the different actors are required in order to solve local problems. 3. New structures of participation, forums, councils, and information exchange need to be established as centers of interchange and decision-making. 4. Any reform needs to be considered globally, involving the institution as a whole and considering all of its objectives and functions. And 5. Self-monitoring and school-based evaluation by and for the major actors are essential, based on a set of goals or a mission statement, objectives, tasks, a calendar of activities and action plans, etc. Hallock and Schaefer, 1994. Mechanisms to permit such school-based management, allowing the individual school to set its own goals, tone, and targets. To design policies and programs in response to site-specific needs. And to plan, collect, and manage school resources, may not be given a very high priority in a given education system. In many countries, the goals and curricular objectives are set by the state or, in private systems, by the sponsoring agency and are assumed to be standard for all schools. Enrollment targets, school calendars, or policies in regard to student promotion may be the same for the entire system, for example, and there may be little scope for their amendment or adaptation. Even if mechanisms for more autonomous school governance do exist, they may be centered largely in the hands of head teachers, local education officers, a small group of senior teachers, or a hand-picked executive committee of the local PTA. Teachers, parents, and the community surrounding the school may have little role to play in these processes. But because greater participation in school management by a variety of interested partners can increase the demand for, and ownership of, the education which occurs in the school, governments should move towards a policy of strengthening school-based partnerships. This is especially important in the area of school improvement activities. Educational innovations, especially those which depend on teacher support and participation, are difficult to implement in any event. Greater teacher involvement in their design and management may help to ensure their implementation. By the same token, greater involvement by parents and community members in school governance can increase their demand and support for education. School and teachers, parent groups, and school committees can play a more active role in school governance. A variety of mechanisms exists which can be used to enhance their participation. For more detail see Unit 3 and 5. Some of these are restricted to actors within the school, that is, the greater involvement of teachers, while others include the participation of partners from outside the school, parents, community organizations, NGOs, private enterprise, and other local actors. Such associations and committees can do a number of things. This can include first the establishment and implementation of school targets and work plans. Teachers, parent groups, and even multi-sectoral school committees can also play a more collegial role in setting policies related to staff development, school community relations, and specific school improvement activities. students too, can play a role in school governance. The above cases show that various management mechanisms inside or outside of school exist or can be established and strengthened in order to promote more participatory approaches to school governance. But the choice about what kind of mechanisms to establish and what powers to invest it with is not necessarily an easy one. A variety of issues must be explored in decisions made before these mechanisms have any real impact on how schools are run and financed. As is the case for changes in parental strategies, many of the changes in teacher and school practices can be traced back to changes in education policy. It is of course not possible to explore here all policies that have an impact on efficiency. To summarize this portion, greater involvement of the community in school governance is purely to support the delivery of quality teaching learning. It is for this reason that teaching and learning-based accountability is emphasized as one of the pillars of today's school governance. For this purpose, it can establish multiple forms of governance and control, each with its own part in the system. While decentralization or decentralizing governance should not be seen as an end in itself, it can be a means for creating more open, responsive, and effective local government and for enhancing representational systems of community-level decision-making. Therefore, it is necessary to work with governance principles at local levels to strengthen local governance processes. And teachers, parent groups, and school committees can play a more active role in school governance. A variety of mechanisms exists which can be used to enhance their participation. Activity. Dear learner, assume your school and surrounding areas. What degree of participation in governance are other partners allowed to attain? Are teachers within a school or a cluster, or individuals within parent associations or village education committees, permitted merely to hear about, and approve of, goals, targets, policies, programs, and budgets established and designed by others, whether at the center or at the local level? Does this participation focus mainly on the seeking, or extracting, of contributions from partners? Are they actually asked to participate actively in the shaping of the school's long-term plans? Lesson 3, the Instructional Program, Dear Learner. This is the third lesson of this unit. In this lesson, we are going to see what type of organization and arrangement are important so as to restore and happily participatory approach with different stakeholders, especially in instructional program. Activity. Dear learner, do you think it is important or possible to involve local people in an instructional process? Why? What those factors that can affect the participation of community in the instructional process? Can you list some of them? Well, when we are looking the very definition of community, a group of citizens bound up in a social system with common identity for survival, suggests community participation in managing the structures of education, that is, governance, work culture, and, in instructional organization, most particularly, the curriculum. Some school leaders and even teachers believe that the local people are not knowledgeable enough to take part in curriculum building at the local level. This is an erroneous impression. Community citizens have bona fide interest in the local school. They have invested their money, time, and effort in the building of the school. Besides, their children attend the local school. They deserve to know what is taught at the school and also should take part in the building of the curriculum. They should be directly or indirectly involved in the teaching and learning process as resource persons. Hence, the third area of potential participation is involvement in the instructional process. It is in this area, the determination of what should be taught, using what materials, and in what ways where greatest collaboration can often occurs. First of all, the phrase instructional process covers a wide range of activities. For our purposes it is better to see the following activities as cited by Schaefer, 1994, 1. Determining the content, curricula, syllabi, of what is taught in schools. 2. Developing appropriate teaching materials, the selection, design, and writing of textbooks and other materials. 3. Delivering the required content, developing and implementing teaching learning methods. 4. Training and upgrading the teachers who deliver it. 5. Monitoring and evaluating school quality, including a. Inputs such as student enrollment, attendance and behavior, teacher attendance and behavior, the availability and quality of educational facilities and the availability and quality, relevance, adequacy, of curricula, materials, and texts. b. Processes such like the quality of teaching and learning in general school improvement programs. c. Outcomes, for instance, the achievement of the school's goals and targets. Student academic achievement, daily learning for promotion or graduation, and student socialization to community and or to national norms and values. In comparison to other areas of education inside and outside the school already examined, the participation of other actors in the instructional process is potentially more difficult to promote. This is so because it deals with three intensely political issues. 1. What children learn, for example, political philosophy, community values, economic knowledge and skills. 2. How well they learn, and, therefore, according to popular wisdom, where they end up in the world, and 3. Pedagogy, traditionally the exclusive prerogative of the teaching profession and, in some societies, of the individual teacher usually formally certified and not always willing to open his/her classroom and reveal his/her performance to the comment of peers or outsiders. Parental and community gazing at such pedagogy, let alone intervening in it, is seldom welcomed. Schaefer, 1994. But given what is often a general lack of understanding about the culture, experiences, and motivations of its children, there is a need to encourage greater cultural articulation between the school and the community, to give recognition to the children's experiences at home and in the community by integrating these into the content and learning activities in school, and to promote some kind of broader partnership in teaching and learning. Such a partnership can also ultimately produce education more relevant to the needs of the community and of their children and greater demand and support for education. Also, unlike the area of school governance, where centralized systems may severely limit the autonomy of schools in setting individually their goals, planning new programs, and even managing budgets, many schools may have considerable freedom to alter and adapt the nature of their instructional processes. One issue in looking at the current nature of participation in the instructional process is the extent to which individual schools or groups of schools can, through the greater involvement of their own personnel, try to improve the quality of this process. Another, of course, is the extent to which others outside of the school, especially parents but also other community members, agents of other development sectors, for example, health and agriculture, private enterprises, NGOs, etc. participate in this process. There is a variety of mechanisms available to make greater collaboration in various aspects of the instructional process possible. Some of these, school clusters, teacher clubs, are limited to members of the school community. Others involve individuals or groups from among parents or from the larger community. Some involve the partners as observers and listeners. Others as more active consultants, managers, and even teachers. According to Schaefer, 1994, these mechanisms can be of use in the following parts of the process. 1. Determining the content of what is taught in school and developing teaching material appropriate to students. There are a number of reasons why teachers and the community should be more involved in areas related to the curriculum and material development. In general, a. The involvement of teachers in developing teaching materials and especially in filling in national curricula and syllabi with content more relevant to local conditions and needs can help ensure the presentation of material of direct use to their students. It can also make teachers feel greater ownership of the school and of what they teach in it. b. The involvement of students, parents, and community leaders in the collecting, processing, analysis, and interpretation of local information may help to ensure the use of local content, the greater articulation between school and community and the inclusion of family and community culture in the school, the marriage of traditional and modern knowledge, coverage of local culture and history, and the inclusion of economically relevant practical subjects. c. Because participation calls for actual hands-on experiences by resource persons in the local community, their involvement in curriculum design informs them better as to their possible instructional role. And d. Involvement in such an activity helps convince both teachers and the community that they have some ownership of what goes on in the school. Such involvement can be encouraged in two ways. Surveys or studies of knowledge and skills useful for children of the community. This includes knowledge in regard to cultural beliefs and events, health and nutrition, the local economy and environment. And the development of syllabi and teaching materials, lesson plans, exercises, examinations, through teacher, parent, and/or community curriculum panels. 2. Delivering the required content. Parents and other members of the community can be encouraged and even tutored and trained to participate more actively in the teaching-learning process. This may be limited to motivating or helping their children at home and include encouraging children to do schoolwork at home, helping to organize a study timetable, establishing a time and a quiet, well-lighted place for regular study at home, listening to children tell about their day at school, monitoring their progress in school, reinforcing positive attitudes about school and learning, reading to children, if the parents are literate, and listening to them read, encouraging enrollment, retention, and attendance. Other partners may also get involved in activities in the school itself through the involvement of parents and community members in teaching, as tutors and assistants to the teacher or for specialized subjects, local culture, craft work. They may also help in the library or canteen, collect materials for projects, craft and other skills, repair furniture, gather information on community resources, and help slow learners. Parents and other community members may also teach specialized subjects, such as local crafts and trades, customs, and history, principles of sex education, and health and agricultural practices, for instance. 3. Training and upgrading teachers. Both teachers themselves and the community can also be more active in the actual training of other teachers. This can be done through in-school or in-cluster upgrading, including the assessment by teachers of their own training needs and subsequent peer training, and B. Participation of parents and community members in professional development programs. First, teachers can work together to evaluate each other's teaching, assess training needs, design and test upgrading activities, and therefore develop among themselves greater personal and professional capacity. Again, the school clusters present a good example of such a process. Other examples are more experiential in nature. Teachers, for example, are trained in how to prepare a map, an agricultural calendar, and a monograph of the local community with students and parents. The community can also be involved in some kinds of teacher training. Such involvement is particularly useful in training teachers about local language and cultural requirements of students and in introducing new teachers to the tradition, habits, and facilities available in the community where they will teach. 4. Monitoring and evaluating school quality, achievement and results. Parents and community groups, though usually kept clearly away from what are considered professional matters of teaching processes, may also have a role to play in monitoring and supervising classroom performance and teacher absenteeism. This includes a. The regular opening of the school and its products to parents and the community, for example, observation of classes, open days, school fairs. They may also serve as an audience for demonstrations of student achievement, such as student writing. B. Regular status progress reports from the head teacher on school conditions and results. C. The involvement of school community organizations in monitoring school quality, for example, in areas such as the adequacy of facilities, the attendance and behavior of students and teachers, and the achievement of school targets. And D. Helping to identify indicators of success, participate in data collection and analysis, and then use the results for subsequent program planning. The fact that such mechanisms and processes of greater participation in the instructional process exist and work in at least some contexts does not mean that they are necessarily easy to put in place. There are a number of specific issues which will inevitably affect their implementation. In summary, there are major roles which teachers within schools and parents, community associations, and NGOs from outside of schools, can play in attempts to improve educational quality. The conditions necessary to introduce some kinds of collaboration, the establishment of school committees or PTAs, for example, may appear quite simple to put in place. But to guarantee genuine participation as we have defined it to empower teachers and the community to gain the necessary knowledge and skills to participate in education and the necessary power to take action, requires a considerable change in the way education is planned and managed, the conscious enhancement of those factors and conditions which encourage participation, and the development of concrete mechanisms and procedures to guide planners and managers in developing such participatory activities. Lesson 4: Benefits of Societal Participation in Education. Dear learner, in the previous section we have seen that the general areas of societal participation in education. These topics are basic issues and will help you to comprehend the subsequent topics. This is the last lesson of Unit 5. In this section, we are going to see the benefits of societal participation in school affairs. Activity. Dear learner, What is the best way to improve parent, family, and community involvement? What are the outcomes of participation? What characteristics define meaningful participation? Very good. Now read the information below and compare your answer with the information provided. Participation means many things to many people. It carries potential benefits, but only if all those involved have a common understanding and set of expectations. Many are convinced that participation is necessary, but there is little information available to them on how to facilitate it. The sorts of questions they are faced with include: what level of participation is appropriate? What is the best way of facilitating participation? What tools can we use to encourage participation? At what point can we say a meaningful level of participation has been achieved? From the above questions we can understand that participation is a rich concept that varies with its application and definition. The way participation is defined also depends on the context in which it occurs. For some, it is a matter of principle. For others, practice. For still others, an end in itself. Indeed, there is merit in all these interpretations. First of all, participation is a good in itself. Participation is the process through which stakeholders influence and share control over priority setting, policy making, resource allocations and access to public goods and services. The process of making decisions about one's own life and then acting on those decisions, of having some influence on the forces and pressures surrounding one's environment, brings benefits to individuals, communities, and society at large. Participation is valued for both intrinsic and instrumental reasons. The intrinsic value refers to the idea that the act of participation is valuable in itself, quite apart from any value it may have in helping to achieve other good things. It's a welcome bonus that in addition to being intrinsically valuable, participation can also be a powerful instrument for achieving a range of valuable outcomes. In particular, participation has the potential to achieve more efficient and equitable outcomes in many different contexts of decision-making, such as allocation of budgetary resources among alternative uses, management of common property resources, delivery of community services, and so on. UN, 2008. When people are able to exercise their voice in the conduct of public affairs, they will have an opportunity to reveal their true preferences. Only participation can allow this exercise of voice. UN, 2008. Participation in the everyday occupations of life is a vital part of human development and lived experience. Through participation, we acquire skills and competencies, connect with others and our communities, and find purpose and meaning in life. Especially, the community development approach emphasizes self-help, the democratic process, and local leadership and community revitalization. Thus, community participation is an important component of community development and reflects a grassroots or bottom-up approach to problem-solving. Effective community participation may lead to social and personal empowerment, economic development, and socio-political transformation. Hence, the greater the community involvement in the process, the greater the input of different groups within the community, then the more likely that what is generated will be an accurate reflection of that community. Thus, by actively involving children and adults in decisions about education, about issues that concern them, and aspects of community development, appropriate decisions could be made about problems within the community. Activity, dear learner. Based on the above argument, Explain the importance of participation in schools and their functions to the community. Well, so let us look at the general importance of community participation in education in general and in schools in particular. First, brought parents and community members closer to schools, leading to long-term gains such as 1. Minimization of discontinuities between schools and communities, and between schools and families. 2. Minimization of conflicts between schools and communities, schools and families, teachers and parents, and what is taught in school and what is taught at home. 3. Easy transition of students going from home to school. 4. Good preparation of students to engage in learning experiences. And 5. Minimized cultural shock of new entrants to schooling. Schaefer, 1994. Second, more resources have also been gathered and, often, have been more efficiently used. Government resources, as well, have been increased in some cases, and more local resources also gathered. For example, more importantly, perhaps, more of these local resources have gone directly to local communities rather than being expended on central programs. Third, the quantity of services provided has also increased. Greater involvement in education and other social services by more actors can lead to the greater demand for, supply of, and use of, these services. Fourth, the quality and relevance of the services provided have also increased. As people become more active in development programs, they have a larger interest in ensuring their quality and relevance and therefore can begin to both contribute directly to this process and oversee the work of other development agents. The involvement of family and community in education can also have effects on the learning environment for children. In the Philippines, it was found that one program called Parent Learning Support System, PLSS, program, transforms schools into friendly, non-alienating, familiar places for children where they can work, play, and study without fear. The learning opportunities being generated and planned collaboratively by parents, community members, and school personnel, such as field trips, parent-teacher-student conferences, summer camps, etc., have greatly enriched the learning resources available to students. Fifth, effects on the output of schooling can also be shown. These include changes in academic achievement and in student attitudes and behaviors. Results from the experimental implementation of the Parent Learning Support System in the Philippines showed significant change in the scholastic performance and attitudes of students whose parents had been involved in PLSS activities and had been trained to assist and guide their children in their schoolwork. When we are looking at the benefits from the major stakeholders' perspective, the first beneficiaries are students. Good community participation in schools might have the following advantages for students. More positive attitudes towards school. Higher achievement, better attendance, and more homework completed consistently. Higher graduation rates and enrollment rates in post-secondary education. Better schools to attend. Families that have the chance to understand the school system better can participate more fully in their children's education. They too will benefit from their engagement with their children's school, discovering resources they can access, building new skills, and developing a deeper connection with their children. In schools with strong family partnerships, teachers understand students who come from other cultures more easily, and in fact, the school can become the natural extension of home, aiding in the preservation of families' cultures and values. So participation of parents has profound advantage for parents themselves with regard to Greater knowledge of education programs and how schools work. Knowledge of how to be more supportive of children. Greater confidence about ways to help children learn. More positive views of teachers. Greater empowerment, Carter, 2003. In general terms, a great part of the impact of participation and empowerment is said to lie at the level of the individual, in the process of human resource development. Some of this impact is cognitive. Through greater involvement in a variety of development activities, people can gain more knowledge, learn better practice, and end with a greater awareness of the development problems that exist, the causes behind these problems, which may or may not be amenable to local control, and, in some cases, their possible solutions. Some of the impact is also psychological. People feel greater self-confidence and self-reliance, less dependence on external inputs and wisdom, greater pride in the significance and validity of local knowledge and experience. A greater sense of accountability and responsibility for their own actions, less of a feeling of marginalization and powerlessness. The combination of such impacts can lead to greater demand on the political and social system. People gain a better idea of the kind of life they want to lead, a greater understanding of what prevents them from achieving such a life, and a greater willingness to make their needs known and, when necessary, to play a larger role in fulfilling these needs themselves. Much of the same kind of impact occurs at the community level as well. Communities can become less marginal and powerless, more self-reliant and independent, more accountable and responsible. Such communities can 1. Gain greater control over information and local technologies. 2. Form alliances and networks within their own area or across to others. 3. Work toward the more efficient and effective management of local resources and, in the longer term, greater ecological sustainability. 4. Develop skills in management and resource mobilization, organizations, income-generating schemes, women's clubs, and a corporate identity, which can serve them well, both in community development and as the basis for negotiating, from greater strength, with outside institutions and bureaucracies. And 5. Attitudes and behaviors. Parents and community members can also gain new ways of thinking and acting and new attitudes about development, particularly about their role in education. Schaefer, 1994. In the best of circumstances, such achievements at the community level also benefit the society at large. Greater participation within a society can lower development costs, for example, through more volunteer labor and the use of more local expertise and resources. Make development programs more cost-effective, and ensure greater equity of the benefits of development within and across communities. It can also increase the impact and sustainability of development programs by encouraging more of a handcrafted approach to development. With such an approach, utilization rates, continuity, and maintenance of development programs can be improved. Without such participation, the opposite may occur. Thus, for example, if the educational planners fail to consult the teachers before introducing reforms, they cannot but expect half-hearted support on the part of those concerned with their implementation. In short, there are a number of benefits of public participation that include 1. Improved governance. 2. Increased quality of the functions performed and services provided by public agencies. 3. Revitalization of democratic practice in general. 4. Maintaining the stability of society. When people are directly involved in the decision-making process, they become more aware of the possible problems and are more willing to live with the consequences than they are when decisions are imposed from outside. They become more aware of problems and tend to be less towards explosive conflicts. 5. Guarding the public interest. To make public agencies more responsive to the needs of public and disadvantaged groups in society. Citizens can work as watchdogs of society. 6. Increased community cohesion and unity and capacity to reduce alienation of the individual. A feeling of political helplessness combined with a general distrust of power is the personal situation known as alienation. This may be particularly important for the weaker sections and marginal groups in society. Community participation in schools also has an advantage for teachers and leaders on greater teaching effectiveness, higher expectations of students, increased ability to understand family views and cultures, greater appreciation of parent volunteers, improved morale, and greater sense of community. Carter, 2003. To sum up this portion, assuming that more participatory approaches to educational development can lead to many of the changes described above, and that the extent of such changes will relate very much to the nature of the approaches used and the context in which they attempt to work, an important question remains: how to facilitate the participation and collaboration which may produce such change. This question is the focus of the following section. What type of school culture should be in place to promote community participation in education? Activity. Dear learner, what do you conclude about the importance of family and community involvement in schools? As a school teacher, how do you describe the level of parental involvement in school affairs in your locality? What type of benefits can you mention in your surrounding areas? Unit summary. Dear learner, how do you get the lessons incorporated in Unit 5? Yes, we have seen from different sources and research confirms that family involvement is a powerful influence on children's achievement in school. It was indicated in this unit that the involvement of schools, parents, and community leaders in the collecting, processing, analysis, and interpretation of local information may help to ensure the use of local content and community culture in the school and coverage of local culture and history. The evidence is clear: when parents are actively involved in their children's education, their children do better in school. Such a partnership can also ultimately produce education more relevant to the needs of the community and of their children, and greater demand and support for education. Within the school, different people will play different roles. The main emphasis in this unit was making sure that parents, school staff, and community members understand that the responsibility for children's educational development is a collaborative enterprise. Partnership means sharing power with families and community members. With regard to benefits of community participation, we have seen that teaching and learning in the classroom do not take place in isolation from the functioning of schools as organizations, nor from their social context. Clearly, many innovations related to increased collaboration in education have been successful because individual schools, clusters, and wider offices wanted to provide better education and were willing to work collaboratively to achieve it. Finally, the unit stresses that large-scale improvement requires a relatively complex kind of cooperation among people in diverse roles performing diverse functions. In both instances, the value of direction, guidance, and cooperation stems from acknowledging and making use of differences in expertise. For most schools, building partnerships entailed a transformation of the school's relationship with families, and required that the school take steps to create a more welcoming, inclusive environment. Overall message of this unit reveal that developing powerful and effective connections between schools, families and communities is hard work. Yet, time and time again, studies demonstrate schools across the world are able to reach beyond their boundaries to successfully link with families and community groups to better the educational outcomes of all children.